A very warm welcome to all of you. In this lecture number 3, we are going to take some important points from chapter number 3, crystal structure. The topics which we are going to study in this lecture are methods of crystal structure analysis. Second is the Laue method and Bragg method. And the third important one is crystal structure of sodium chloride. So these points we are going to study in this lecture. So let us start this lecture. The first point which we are going to discuss here is nothing but the methods of crystal structure analysis. For the analysis of crystal structure, following methods are used. So these are the four different methods for the analysis of crystal structure. First one is the Laue method, second is the Bragg method, third one is the powder method, and fourth one is the rotating crystal method. Now in this lecture, we have to look towards the two important methods among these four. One is the Laue method and second one is the Bragg method. So the first method among these two is Laue method of X-ray analysis. Now what is this method? What type of instrumentation is there? That we have to study. When a beam of X-ray is allowed to fall on a crystal, it gets transmitted through the crystal as a number of diffracted beams. So whenever we bombard a X-ray on a particular crystal, then what happens? That crystal acts as a transmission grating, and through this grating a number of diffracted beams is to be obtained. The diffraction pattern is obtained on a photographic plate. Whenever the diffraction takes place by the bombardment of this X-ray on a particular crystal, the diffraction pattern is obtained on a photographic plate. The observation of intensities and position of spots on photographs give the geometrical information of crystal, such as distance between lattice planes of a crystal. Now if we observe carefully the photographic plate pattern, now on that photographic plate the intensities and positions of spots we have to observe carefully, and by observing that intensities and position of spots, we can get some geometrical information about the crystal of a particular compound. That information includes the distance, such as the distance between the lattice planes of a crystal. So we get an idea regarding the distance between the lattice planes present in a crystal. Now in this Laue method, this type of the simple instrumentation is to be used. So in this case, we have to take a X-ray sources here. From this particular target, the X-ray can be generated. Then that X-ray can be incident upon the crystal which we take in this crystal holder. After that, whenever this X-ray interacts with a particular crystal, then what happens? The two type of the phenomena can be takes place. Some of the X-ray get diffracted while some get undiffracted beam. So these two type of the beams is obtained. So those beams which get diffracted can be recorded with the help of photoplate. Now how this photoplate is there, how it occurs or how it looks. So for this purpose we take here one photograph, that is a Laue photograph of magnesium oxide. So this photograph consists of various numbers of spots, that spots having a varying intensity, and these intensity of the spots gives us information about a particular structure of a particular crystal. Now the centrally situated part in this photograph is due to undiffracted beam, the beam which is get undiffracted. So for this purpose, this central part is notation for that particular undiffracted beam. On the other hand, there are a number of other spots are there surrounding this central spot. So that spots are due to the diffracted beam. Now if we observe the intensity and the position of these spots, we can guess the distances between the lattice planes of a crystal. So this method is called as the Laue method of X-ray analysis. Now if we observe carefully the Laue photograph, so some information we will get from this Laue photograph, such as central spot due to undiffracted beams. Just we look here that the center spot stands for undiffracted beams. Around the central spot, several spots of varying intensities are obtained. From the knowledge of distance through which the beam is deviated from the central spot, the distance between the crystal and photoplate, the angle of diffraction is to be calculated. So if we want to calculate the angle of diffraction, so for this purpose we have to take into consideration up to which there is a deviation from the central spot for a particular spot, then what is the distance between the crystal and the photoplate? So from this knowledge we can calculate the angle of diffraction. From positions of spots, diffraction angles and intensities of spots, we get the information about symmetry and relative positions of atoms, ions or molecules in a particular crystal. So in a short we can say that from the positions of the spots, diffraction angles and intensities of the spots, we can get an idea regarding the symmetry of the crystal and the relative positions of atoms, ions or molecules in a crystal. So that is helpful for us to determine or to analyze the structure of the particular crystal. So this is the first important method for analysis of a crystal structure, that is called as the Laue method. The second important method for the structure analysis of a crystal is called as the Bragg method of crystal analysis. Now, on which principle this method is based? So first of all, we have to look towards the principle of this method. A crystal is composed of a series of equally spaced atomic planes. Any crystal is composed of a series of equally spaced atomic planes. So that crystal is formed from these atomic planes. So crystal behaves not only as a transmission grating, those we studied in a Laue method, but also as a reflecting grating. So according to this method, a given crystal behaves both as a transmission grating as well as the reflecting grating. A beam of monochromatic X-rays striking the atomic planes will undergo interference or reinforcement and behaves as if it is reflected from surface of a crystal. So whenever we take a monochromatic X-ray beam and if it strike on a particular atomic planes present in a given crystal, then it undergo interference. So from this interference we can get some idea regarding the structure of the particular crystal. Now, how this interaction of beam of a monochromatic X-ray to that of the atomic planes can be takes place? So for this purpose, we have to consider here this type of the simple figure, which is nothing but the X-ray reflection from equidistant and parallel planes. That is a Bragg law. So in this case, we have to take here three different equidistant and parallel planes. First one is the A dash, second is the B dash, and third one is the C dash, which are separated by the distance of D. This total distance is equal to 2D. Then we have to strike a ray of some parallel X-ray beam is there. Then after striking the surface of the first plane A dash, some of the beam get reflected while some get entered in a particular crystal, and after that it get reflected from point Q is there. So if we take into consideration this type of the reflection, their particular glancing angles, from this we can get an idea regarding the internal arrangement of atoms, ions or molecules in a particular crystal. So this is in a brief introduction regarding the Bragg method of crystal structure analysis. Now the next important point in this Bragg method is called as the Bragg equation. Now what is by this Bragg equation? What is the use of this Bragg equation? So that we have to study now. W.H. Bragg and W.L. Bragg developed a very useful relation between the wavelength of the X-rays and the spacing between the lattice planes under the condition for the reinforcement of the reflected beam. So one equation is given by the scientists W.H. Bragg and W.L. Bragg that gives the relationship between wavelength of X-rays and the spacing between the lattice planes. So by considering that relation, he proposed one equation that is called as the Bragg equation, which is nothing but the n lambda is equal to 2d sin theta. So this equation is called as the Bragg equation. In this equation some terms are involved, like this n stands for the integers like 1, 2, 3, 4 up to the infinity. Lambda stands for wavelength of X-ray. D stands for distance between the successive planes, and theta stands for glancing angle. So this is an important equation, that is a Bragg equation, which is useful for the calculation of either the wavelength. We may calculate here the value of this n, or we may calculate the interplanar spacing between the two atomic planes. So this important equation is the Bragg equation. Now after studying these two important methods for crystal structure analysis, next we have to study the crystal structure of sodium chloride, how this sodium chloride crystal looks, or what type of this crystal structure is. In the crystal structure of sodium chloride, the atoms, ions are arranged in a face-centered cubic lattice. So that crystal structure of NaCl is of the type face-centered cubic lattice. The crystal structure of sodium chloride is as shown below. So this is an actual crystal structure for the sodium chloride in the form of face-centered cubic lattice. So in this face-centered cubic lattice, the two type of the ions is there, Na plus, Cl minus. This small circle stands for Na plus, while this larger circle stands for Cl minus. So in an ordered arrangement, these ions are arranged in this face-centered cubic lattice, and this is the overall or the complete structure of the sodium chloride. Now, this crystal of a sodium chloride has some characteristics. What type of the characteristics is there for this NaCl crystal? So that we have to look here. The crystal structure of sodium chloride consists of, the first important point is, the sodium and chlorine units are arranged in a face-centered cubic lattice. In this case, the sodium and chlorine units are arranged in a face-centered cubic lattice. At the corner of the cube, either sodium or chlorine unit is placed. So at the corner of this cube, if you consider the corner of this cube, at that corner either sodium or Cl unit may be present. At the center of all six faces of the cube, either sodium or chlorine unit is placed. Now there are 6 faces of this cube is there. So at the center of the 6 faces of the cube, either sodium or chlorine unit may be present. Halfway between the two sodium units, a chlorine unit is present. If we consider the two sodium units, so in between the two sodium units, one chlorine unit is present. So in this case, suppose if we consider here these two small sodium units, this first one is there, this is second one is there. So in between these two sodium units, one chlorine unit is present. At the same time, in between the two chlorine units, one sodium unit is present. So this is the point number 4 and point number 5. And at the last, the 6th number point is, there are two face-centered lattices, one containing sodium units and other containing the chlorine units. So in this crystal structure of a NaCl, there are the two face-centered lattices is there. One consists of a sodium unit at the center, while the other consists of the chlorine units at the center. So in this crystal structure of a NaCl, there is an alternate arrangement of sodium and chlorine unit is present, and that's why we can say that this crystal structure is of the type face-centered cubic lattice consisting of Na plus and Cl minus ions. So in this lecture, we focus upon some important points from this chapter number 3. The first point which we studied here is nothing but the what are the different methods for the analysis of the crystal structure. So from that methods, we discuss here the two important methods. First one is the Laue method and second is called as the Bragg method. After that, we studied here the Bragg equation. After that, in the last part of this lecture, we look towards the crystal structure of NaCl, the crystal structure of NaCl and the properties of this particular crystal structure of NaCl. So with this, I stop here. Remaining points from the chapter we will take in the next lecture. Thank you. Thank you so much.